It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, today we're going to jump on that sharp interactive bar. We're going to go through HP's third quarter. The numbers are in. You'll see clearly in the big red letters it says, will $10 billion in revenue evaporate in FY 2023? Ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the numbers and where HP at 9 months in and the amount of money they need just to match last year's revenue, well, they're nowhere close to last year's revenue. And quite honestly, if they hit their current run rates, they're going to be like $10 billion off of FY 2022's number. $10 billion. And I'm thinking the hybrid worker's not working out for HP, because anytime you hear their leadership talk, I mean, it's always about the hybrid worker and how the hybrid worker is going to be able to benefit from all the wonderful things that HP does, like all these subscriptions and all that stuff. But obviously it's not paying out. You know, they're not growing their revenue. And they're going to get to a point sooner or later where their lack of print revenues are going to kill them, because it's in that print revenue that the majority of their operating profit exists. It's in the supplies from the print revenue that the majority of their operating profit exists. And sooner or later they're going to hit the ceiling in their costs, and they're not going to be able to, well, they're just not going to be able to function profitably, is my prediction. And when you start evaporating $10 billion a year in revenue, it's not a good thing by any stretch of the imagination. And think about this. You know, last year they bought a company called Poly, which running about $1.6 billion in revenue. So think about that. Where's that $1.6 billion if Poly remained flat? Wouldn't that really indicate that HP's down from year over year revenue by almost $12 billion? Wow, it's almost uncomprehendable, isn't it? Let me jump on the Sharp Interactive board. I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts. Top line revenue for the quarter was $13.2 billion. If you break it out to the divisions, in the printing unit, they did $4.2 billion, and in the personal systems, they did $8.9 billion. Total of $13.2 billion. $13.2 billion for the quarter. Let me show you something. FY 2022, that is $63 billion. And by the way, that year they were down 0.8%. $63 billion. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at where they're at right now, 9 months in, they're at $39.8 billion. That means they need $23.2 billion just to hit the $63 billion. Their run rates for quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3 are around $13 billion. So if you just do simple math, it shows you they're going to be a minimum of $10 billion down from last year's number. That's pretty scary stuff. Let's look at this slide. This is around our printing, and I put up here in red, I put the, I'm thinking the nonsensical hype regarding subscription was in fact pure nonsense, because it hasn't helped HP at all grow their supply business. I mean, the subscriptions were supposed to grow their supply business, right? The problem is the people aren't printing in their houses. The hybrid worker's not printing. And when the hybrid worker doesn't print, guess what? If they did buy a subscription, they more than likely canceled it. And you know, one thing that HP never does is they never give you the details around the subscriptions. You just brag about all these subscriptions they sold. But when you look at the printing revenue for the third quarter, guess what? Supplies are down, and that makes it the 8th straight quarter in a row of supply revenue declines. 8 quarters in a row. 2 full years of revenues of declining revenue in supply business. So it doesn't matter if you're selling subscriptions. It's irrelevant. They're not helping you grow your revenue. And you need to really face that reality, because you continue fooling yourself, I think. But the numbers don't lie. Supply revenue down 2%. Total hardware units down 19% year over year. 19%, ladies and gentlemen. Consumer printing revenue down 28%. Commercial printing revenue down 6%. 8 straight quarters of decline. Do I need to remind you all? Remember I did this for their second quarter? There's your 8 quarters, ladies and gentlemen. They're not growing their business. They're barely hanging on to what they got, and it's declining. So the 10Q has not come out for the third quarter, but when the 10Q comes out for the third quarter, I'll be able to go into that 10Q, and it gives you the breakdown by quarter of the supply revenue, and it breaks out the commercial and the consumer revenue. And I'm looking forward to that, because as I predicted at the end of the second quarter, I believe they're going to do about $11 billion in supply business for FY23. Actually, probably a little less than that. But in FY 2018, they did $13.5 billion. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. The billions of dollars is evaporating from the supply business at HP. And the supply business is where the profit's at. And it continues to decline, continues to decline. So we need to pay attention to that, and I'm looking forward to that 10Q coming out. Let's look at the personal systems. I put on here, where the hell is Poly? You know, there's a couple of things they did with this personal systems group, and I shared this with you on their second quarter, but they decided not to, count the notebooks anymore because they were tired of saying notebook business was down because everybody thinks the HP notebook is going to save that company. And when they had that little bit of a spike during the COVID, I said, you know what, sooner or later they're going to get pressure from competition. The pressure from competition's here. They actually talk about that. But ladies and gentlemen, where's this Poly revenue? Let's talk about what's going on over here in the personal system. They had a revenue of $8.9 billion, but the total units were up 3% year over year. What units are they talking about? Notebooks, audio visual stuff from Poly. I mean, consumer PC units, 8% year over year. Commercial P units flat year over year. Consumer PC revenue down 12%. Down 12%. Commercial PC revenue down 11%. We had a little bit of increase in the unit placements, but the revenue's down. Remember, it was the opposite a while back. The revenues were way up, but the units were down because they were able to raise their prices during the supply chain issue. And I said sooner or later they're going to get competition from the folks like Dell and others. Well, the competition's coming fierce for them. But where the hell's this Poly revenue? Revenue down due to promotional pricing and currency, offset in part by volume, resulting in share gains. Revenue up 9% quarter over quarter due to seasonality, resulting in share gains. What? There's no share gains. Come on, folks. I don't care how many units you put out there if you don't make any money doing it. Your revenue's down in both categories. I thought this was kind of interesting to me, the key growth areas. I want to just read this top one for you. The hybrid systems, year-over-year revenue growth driven by Poly. Poly, where are you at? Introduced the Poly Studio X52 all-in-one video bar and mid-size meeting spaces that features AI smart camera technology, Poly noise block AI, and acoustic fence technology. It's so great to talk about all this stuff without any details. It kind of reminds me of Konica when they start talking about they're all covered here in America, right? All covered, we're knocking it out of the park. But no, they're not really knocking it out of the park because their numbers don't reflect that. Kind of like here, we're talking about Poly, but we don't even know what the Poly revenue is. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, the OEMs that their core deliverable of print is falling off a cliff. They really have to give them some details on this other stuff. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of nonsense. Here's their quarters of decline regarding hardware. Remember when they used to count the notebooks? But boy, we started seeing quarters where they were down 23%, 32%, 26%. I mean, what did they do? Oh, well, let's stop counting that. Don't count those notebooks. Don't make the world aware that nobody's buying our notebooks. Ladies and gentlemen, sooner or later, the hype will face reality. And we'll see a major crash in the HP stock price. I'm predicting it. I would not be surprised if people start shorting this stuff. It's been trying to get up over that $30 a share. And folks, at one point it was 40, 34. It's just, I just think you got to be insane to invest in this company. They have no service capability. Their supply revenues, which is the core of their business, is going to be declining almost $3 billion from where it was in 2018. They bought a company called Poly that was doing about $1.6 billion in revenue. It seems that really didn't help them because overall they're going to be over $10 billion short from 2022's number. Folks, sooner or later, well, let me just say it this way. I think shit's going to hit the fan, and everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.